Ole Miss is becoming Mississippi's team right now, and it's not particularly close.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports. Today on the show, we talk about how Ole Miss and their schedule this season has headline games with Georgia, the most fun game in LSU, trap games in Arkansas, Florida, and Oklahoma. And honestly, that covers most of the SEC slate, but it does not cover the Egg Bowl. And that game becoming just another football game after how intense it was over the last decade, that was not on my bingo card. This is the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you very much for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And a special hello to the everydayers who make the show what it is. July 2nd, a little bit more than a week from right now, we'll be at Walk-Ons in Ridgeland, Mississippi at 7 p.m. Central Time for a little bit of an informal meet and greet. We're just going to get together as a Loom community and kind of get to know each other a little bit. So come to that and meet up and grow the community. Also, there's still time to join the Grove Collective and help Ole Miss football be elite. You can go to thegrovecollective.com and join today. Today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. It's really interesting stuff. When you think about it, we're doing all of these episodes about different type games that Ole Miss has this season. And part of this is Mississippi State right now isn't particularly good. But I don't know that it's 100% that matters anyway. You know, the headline game of this season, that's obviously the Georgia Bulldogs. That's going to be the number one game on Ole Miss's schedule. Every Ole Miss fan is going to circle that. The most fun game, we talked about it Wednesday, is the LSU game. That game has a chance to be a throwback to days gone by for the Ole Miss Rebels and the LSU Tigers. You have trap games, teams that are good enough to beat Ole Miss to prevent them from making the college football playoff in Arkansas, in Oklahoma, and Florida, a game in the swamp that is worth knowing. And they have all these games, and you're like, okay, the Egg Bowl is going to be the most intense. But that's not the case this year, with South Carolina being so intense over Juice Wells to the point where Williams-Brice Stadium has a chance to be an absolute cauldron. So that's 6 out of the 8 SEC games. The 2 that are left over is Mississippi State and Kentucky. Those are the 2 that's left over that don't necessarily get into a category. Now, we have to talk about them because they're SEC games and they're good teams and all of that good stuff. But this game is not where it was in 2017. This game isn't even where it was in 2021. This game is completely been just overshadowed with the fact that Ole Miss has become a good program, and Mississippi State has kind of been a middling to low-end program over the last couple of years. Ole Miss has a chance this fall to win their 4th out of 5 in the Egg Bowl. 4 wins out of 5. When you look at the historical record of this series, only a very few coaches have won 4 out of 5 Egg Bowls. Like Johnny Vaught won that. Billy Brewer, I think, got that. But that's about it. One way or another, that's about it. And you have a situation to where, honestly, the game might mean something for the state of Mississippi. It might be an extremely heated rivalry in the game and when they do it between the lines. In the big course of action on Ole Miss's schedule, it doesn't mean that much. It doesn't. You're looking on the SEC slate, the Mississippi State game is probably 7th or 8th on Ole Miss's schedule this year. It's honestly replacing about where Vanderbilt would be normally. And part of that is because Mississippi State has a new coach. They're going to go through some structural changes within their athletic program, and they're not going to be particularly good. And Ole Miss is going to be really good. They are a preseason top 5 level team that teams have to pay attention to. And Ole Miss is just completely fishing in a different pond than Mississippi State at the moment. And because of that, it's starting to ripple through the state of Mississippi. Now, you do have some fans inside the state where you just have state fans when you're born into it. You're always going to have that. But the neutrals, the casuals that are either LSU fans or Alabama fans or whoever's good, all of a sudden they're talking Ole Miss. And Ole Miss is kind of becoming that it school in the state of Mississippi. They have really pretty uniforms. They have excellent colors. They have a nice marketing and branding scheme out there that just benefits with bringing people in, which is awesome because for the better part of 40 years, Ole Miss did a really good job of making their brand exclusive. Now, if you bring people into your brand, you're trying to gather people, it can grow at a fairly rapid rate as heartstrings are developed and you have a situation to where they come in and they have that. And everybody wants to gripe about the same stuff that they had back in the 90s or the early 2000s. And that just honestly isn't relevant anymore. You have a situation in the state of Mississippi right now, the way it sits. You have Ole Miss just standing alone. It's not particularly close in the state of Mississippi right now to where, hey, if a TV station, let's say WJTV in Jackson, had an idea. It's like, hey, we just have talent to record with one game. Ole Miss is going to get 8 games in the course of a 13-game season. And Mississippi State and Southern are probably going to split up the other 5. That's the way this works. Eyeballs are on Ole Miss right now, whether nationally, the Phil Steels, the Athlons, the Lindys, the ESPNs, whatever you want to say, that has Ole Miss as a top 10 team, those eyeballs are on Ole Miss. They're not on Mississippi State. They're not on Southern Miss. They're just not. Now, it's not saying that Southern Miss or Mississippi State can't get there in the future. They're just not there right now. And that's okay. But we'll see. Lane Kiffin has a chance for 4 out of 5 in the Egg Bowl this year. And honestly, he's probably going to be a 17 to 20 point favorite to get there. As just the way it is. With as good as this football team is, Mississippi State is just biding their time to where the talent level at Ole Miss drops down a little bit. Thanks again for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. We continue to talk about the battle for the Golden Egg and how this series has a chance to get lopsided, like real lopsided. Game Time is the place to get your NBA Finals tickets, and with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. They have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, basically anything that you would want in the customer service suite to have, they have it. They have one of the best suites that are out there. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of that screaming and shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. So the Egg Bowl, like I said, has a chance to get really lopsided. And when you look at the Egg Bowl as it sits right now, Lane Kiffin will be going this year for 4 wins out of 5 years. There was that one year in 2022 where all the craziness was happening. Ole Miss ended up losing the game in Fayetteville, lost to Mississippi State, kind of wrecked their season, the whole Lane Kiffin to Auburn stuff that went on, and Ole Miss ended up losing that Egg Bowl. That's the one game. Ole Miss had the better team. I think they were a double-digit favorite in that game, but Mississippi State won it because of all of the stuff that was going on around it. Ole Miss, other than that, has fairly easily won this game. Even a year ago in the Egg Bowl, the Ole Miss won 17-7. It was a tight game, but Mississippi State offensively had no chance to score. Pete Golding's defense was just toying with Mississippi State's offense over the course of that game. And it just happened. It's gotten to the point where when Ole Miss plays Mississippi State, it plays like Mississippi State playing Southern Miss. That's kind of what it's like. The talent disparity has gotten to such a point that there's really nothing to get away from. Now, the good news for Mississippi State, and I will say this, Ole Miss is going to lose somewhere between 45 and 50 players after this season, and you're going to have to replace all of those guys. Mississippi State has a chance to make a jump, and college athletics in general has a chance to make a jump year to year. It doesn't necessarily matter right now if Mississippi State is a particularly good team. They're not going to make the playoff. They're not going to do anything. They just have to learn how to get right at this point. And we'll see exactly what they do. I'm not overly concerned with what they're doing. Like I said, they're kind of the Vanderbilt on Ole Miss's schedule this year. They're not Kentucky, but they're probably the worst team on Ole Miss's schedule. And that's weird to think of whenever you have the battle for the Golden Egg, the Egg Bowl, as intense as it's been. A.J. Brown, the mayor of Starkville, scoring a touchdown in 2017. DK Metcalf in that same game scoring a long touchdown and doing the first fake peace celebration. Elijah Moore saw that in that game. Elijah Moore in 2019 copied that. Ole Miss got a 15-yard penalty in that game. In that 2019 game, there was a missed extra point that would have tied it up. But if you take that away and Ole Miss wins that game, Ole Miss has won like 5 straight games in Starkville. It is weird how this series is getting as lopsided as it is, and you don't even realize that it's happening. I think Ole Miss has won 4 out of 5 in Starkville. Ole Miss has won 4 out of 5 overall. In Oxford, they have not done as well, but they've done well enough. Over the last, since 2018, we'll go since 2018, okay? Because 2018, that was the Jordan Ta'amu, the state defense that was so good. That was the last time they were really good. It was. In 2019 was the Joe Moorhead, Matt Luke, the piss and the miss, the whole 9 yards. But that game wasn't necessarily the case. That Elijah Moore piss completely turned this rivalry to the point where it's like, hey, let's go back in a time machine to 1957. That is what is happening with this rivalry right now. Again, I'm not saying that Mississippi State can't get back. I'm not saying that they won't be good again. I'm not saying that. I'm saying right now, they're as bad as they've been since like 1985 in this rivalry. What Billy Brewer did to Mississippi State, Lane Kiffin is in the process of doing that again. I don't want to say that Lane Kiffin is doing what Johnny Vaught did to Mississippi State because that's a completely different ballgame. But the point is, Mississippi is Ole Miss's team right now. I mean, Ole Miss is Mississippi's team right now, I should say. And that is pretty cool. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Mississippi State isn't the only MAG game on the SEC schedule. We talk Kentucky next, and we haven't talked Kentucky yet. But we're going to talk about it next. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available in the Amazon Fire TV app, in the free Fire TV channels app, Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Be part of history. So we talk Mississippi State, and it is true. Like, Ole Miss is becoming Mississippi's team, and that's in place of the fans that you see that would root for Alabama, that would root for LSU, that kind of are the glory hunters, because you're going to have the Ole Miss fans and the Mississippi State fans. They're locked in. So the last game on the SEC slate for Ole Miss is the Kentucky Wildcats, and it's in Oxford. It's at 11 a.m. It'll be on either ESPN or ABC. It'll be a straight out of game day type of game. Kentucky, they've gotten better over the last few years. I really like Barrion Brown as a player. I just do. He's kind of my dude. I don't know how good Brock Vandergriff is going to be. I don't know if the kid that transferred from Rutgers is going to end up winning the job. There's a lot of unknowns that you have with the Kentucky Wildcats. Before Mike Elko got the Texas A&M job, Ross Bjork was getting ready to hire Mark Stoops as the head coach at Texas A&M. And then he didn't because there was a booster revolt. Ross Bjork is no longer the athletic director at Texas A&M now. So how does somebody do that, come back to Kentucky, and have all of the respect that he had before he pulled the stunt? Because Mark Stoops is one of the better coaches that Kentucky has ever had. I mean, next to Paul Bear Bryant, maybe Rich Brooks. I don't know that Mark Stoops has anybody that you can compare to. Like, was it Jerry Stovall maybe? I don't know. Bill Curry was there. He wasn't very good. Hal Mumme was okay for a little bit, but that was only when he had Mike Leach as an offensive coordinator. Kentucky, kind of a weird situation right now. Now, we'll see. Whenever they get to Oxford, they would have already played South Carolina, so they will already be SEC battle-tested in the conference. Then they come down to Oxford for that early game, and we'll see exactly how that goes. The last time Kentucky came down was in 2022, 2 years ago, in Oxford, 11 o'clock. It was the first stripe-out game that Ole Miss ever attempted, and it turned out to be really good, honestly. But the Jared Ivey sack caused fumble. They recovered it, and Ole Miss ended up winning that game, ended up starting off the year 7-0, losing against the LSU Tigers. Kentucky, decent team, good team. The talent's going to be all right. It's going to be fine. This, to Ole Miss fans, though, is probably at the bottom of the list of I want to see that game. No, even the Egg Bowl, which is not a very good Mississippi State team this year, is ranked higher than the Kentucky Wildcats. Yeah, the Kentucky game is just weird. There's not necessarily any storylines that get you fired up other than the fact that this is the SEC opener for Ole Miss. It's honestly, it can best be described as a meh game to the fan base. Now, the players they better not take it as a meh game, but the fan base is kind of there. As hyped as the Ole Miss fan base is for the Georgia game, to where every single fan has that circled. I don't know if I've heard one single Ole Miss fan mention the Kentucky Wildcats over the last 4 months, because it just doesn't matter. It just does not matter. And when I say it doesn't matter, I mean as far as the big scheme, because if Ole Miss loses to Kentucky, let's say Ole Miss loses that game, drops that game, Ole Miss isn't making the playoffs. It's all she wrote. Ole Miss has a better football team, talent-wise, roster-wise, and this being a home game than Kentucky. Ole Miss should win this game. For Kentucky to win this game, Ole Miss has to help them. Ole Miss fan base isn't dumb enough to where you can fool them on that. They know that. And so they're going into that game with those expectations of winning that football game. And because of that, it gets put in the W category. Kentucky if you turn the ball over, if you go out there and you play like Ole Miss did a year ago against Louisiana Monroe, that will at best be problematic, because this is one thing you can count on with the Kentucky Wildcats. Defensively, they are going to be unbelievably sound. There are. Mark Stoops has those guys ready to go every single year. Offensively, they're going to be very ball control oriented and playing slow. So if you can't stop them from getting first downs, they're going to put together 7-minute drives. They brought back, I think, Liam Cohen, or was that last year? I need to look. When the magazines and all that come in, I need to see what's happening. But with Brock Vandegrift and those guys, Barry and Brown, there's a chance that Kentucky could be in a little bit of an explosive team. So when you play Kentucky, you can't turn the ball over to play into their defense. You can't do that. You have to string together first downs and stay on the field offensively. And you have to limit explosive plays by Kentucky's offense. That is the secret. If you do that, you will beat them by a touchdown or two. If you don't, it's going to be a dogfight, and Kentucky does not beat themselves. And a team that doesn't beat themselves, that's a scary proposition, because they're constantly getting the most out of their talent level every single game. So we'll see. We're going to do W's and L's a week from Monday. We'll start those shows where we do 4 W's each every show, because I have another vacation week coming up. I'll be back Monday, full go. Everything will be normal. But the week of the 4th of July, obviously at the meet and greet in Mississippi, I'm going to be out and about, but we're going to do W's and L's during that week, those 12 games. We'll talk about what's going on there. This is a playoffs or bust season, period. There's not really any way you can get around it. There's no sense in running from that expectation. You should just absolutely own it. And if you own it, it'll be fine. And we can have the discussion of what Ole Miss needs to do to get to where they're going. Because this is one thing you need to know from me. Some people cover Ole Miss from an angle of Ole Miss can't do this. For instance, this year, it's like they're coming into it that Ole Miss cannot win the national championship. That's not an option. Other people are that they can, and that is going to shade every bit of their views and everything that happens. Whatever takes they have in this opinion-based business is going to come off of that simple question. Can or can't Ole Miss do it? If that's depending on how you answer that, depends on how you're going to take whatever happens. If Ole Miss has a bad fourth quarter, it could be a see, I told you so. They could never win it. If Ole Miss has a bad fourth quarter and you think they can, they just had a bad fourth quarter. Really, really interesting stuff. Anyway, Monday, I will be back full go, and we'll do next week as normal. Be fun. I appreciate everybody being patient this week. I think we have Michael Katz tomorrow, and we have Stuart McLaughlin on Sunday. But on Monday, starting Monday, we'll have normal show and 5 shows next week as well. So it should be pretty cool. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. We have the most perspective surrounding Ole Miss sports, and it's one of the many reasons why we are the number 1 Ole Miss podcast, and thank you for that. Next week, back full go on Monday. But for your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. And for those of you on YouTube, we will send you there right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.